Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Thursday, February 17th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The spring game is in 58 days, the Notre Dame game in 198 days, the game against Michigan in 282 days. Wednesday afternoon, Ohio State Athletic Director Gene Smith met with the media to answer questions about a variety of topics, ranging from a possible Big Ten football schedule change to the future of the league's TV deal, what things could look like after college football playoff expansion, the state of the football program at Ohio State, and much more. This may run a little longer than a typical episode, but there was a lot of interesting information in there, and I think you guys are going to want to hear it. So, as always, this audio is courtesy of the Ohio State University Athletics Department. We're going to start with NIL. That's obviously been a very hot topic across the college football landscape. So here are some of Gene Smith's kind of overall thoughts on NIL and how it's been going so far. Can it be regulated? And maybe more importantly, should it be regulated?
I think it should be regulated. In fact, I served on the committee and made the ultimate recommendation with my colleagues. And I felt at that time there might be some regulations that would emerge. Either the NCAA would regulate or there might be some federal legislation that might occur. That didn't happen. There's no federal regulations right now, and the NCAA is taking a little different approach to it, and so understandably so, with all the different state laws that exist that they would run up against. So I'm hopeful that at some point in time we do get federal legislation. I don't think the NCAA is the answer in this particular case. I think it needs to be federal legislation, and that won't happen now because of what's going on in Washington, but maybe it will at some point. I think there's enough politicians who are paying attention and are interested, but it's going to take time. So in the interim, it is a wild, wild west, and so many different things have emerged, and what we have to do is make sure we don't lose ground in our competitive advantage in this space, but also do what's right for our student athletes and protect them and make sure that they're taking advantage of it the right way. So it's kind of our focus, but you're right. It's every day there's something new that you read about or hear about. Yeah.
Ohio State is changing its approach to NIL a little bit this year. They announced the formation of the new Edge Group earlier in the year. So what exactly does the new Edge Group do? Here's Smith's explanation on that.
Yeah, the Edge Group is a result of our SWAT team, which has been our legal compliance and trademark and licensing group that every week looks at the deals that the student athletes upload into our portal. Remember, the state law requires our student athletes to share their deals before they enact them. So that's how Open Doors, our partner, helps us. So our athletes load it up in the portal, our SWAT team looks at them, and make sure there's no, adult entertainment, distilled liquor, marijuana deals, those type of things. I can't remember everything in that state law, but they look at that. They don't approve them or disapprove them. They just look for those things. And then the student athlete activates. So the Edge team over time realized that one thing that was missing was a connector. What the Edge team is a connector. So we've communicated with donors, with the chamber members and others that, hey, here's how NIL works. But many of them don't know how to connect with the athletes. So now they can call an Edge team representative and say, this is the profile of what I'm looking for. They're all not going to get certain athletes, but this is the profile of what I'm looking for, as opposed to them going to OhioStateBuckeyes.com, pulling up a team name and reading all their backgrounds on an athlete. They can call the Edge team, and we can connect them with that athlete. But we don't do the deal. We don't negotiate the deal. We don't do any of that space. We just say, hey, here's Clay Hall's phone number, his email address. He fits your profile. Here's 5 other athletes that fit that profile. Run with it.
There have obviously been a lot of negative reports about the impacts of NIL over the last year or so, with rumors of whole recruiting classes being bought and deals that maybe didn't go very well. But there's also been a positive impact. What is it like for Smith to see that positive impact, the NIL really maybe changing the lives of some players and their families?
I've embraced, NIL a long time ago. I think that's probably why I was asked to co-chair that committee. I've always been one to drive towards how do we provide more economic opportunities for our young people and cost of attendance. I was an idiot for years on changing our scholarship model. So it's really never been stress for me on NIL. It's been about learning. It's been about making sure we educate our student athletes the right way. So right now they pay their taxes, and all those type of things, and that's been really cool. And Travion's story is just phenomenal. It's just phenomenal, so yeah, it makes me feel good. We had, some of you may have paid attention, we had 3 of our athletes go to the Board of Trustees meeting last week and publicly talked about their experience. I had Sarah in volleyball and Mitchell in lacrosse, and Mitchell's a beast. If you haven't followed him, our lacrosse player Mitchell Pelkey, I mean, he's a creative beast. And I was talking to Jimmy Sotos last night he's on freaking TikTok. You ever see Jimmy Soto dance on TikTok? I mean, come on. So, those to your point, Travion and CJ and all those guys, they're top of the pyramid. But, when I talk to the other Olympic sport athletes who are able to engage this, it's just so warming, because we got to remember they're on partial scholarships. They're not on full ride scholarships. And they are able to defray some of the costs that they incur. And Mitchell's story was a perfect one. He said publicly he's going to make about $200,000. He's getting paid by YouTube monthly, and he's on 30% scholarship. So he won't leave with that. And that's the stuff that moves me. Sure, Travion's story moves me as well, because he can help his family. But our Olympic sport athletes, Sarah was a walk-on, and she's killing it through clinics. So I hear so many of them. It's warming. It really is. That's not stressful, just challenging, just to constantly stay ahead of it. And then the Wild Wild West part is, can't keep track of that. It's just crazy.
So that's the good news. Now let's get to the bad news. The other side of that NIL conversation is that some schools have, let's just say, been more aggressive with it than others. Is that something that Gene Smith needs to thinks might need to be looked at? You'll hear his answer on that, and then you're going to hear a follow-up from Bill Landis of The Athletic.
Yeah, that's the part where we need that federal legislation that we were talking about earlier. We got to get a hold on the inducement part. That's the difference between us and the NFL, the NBA, all the others. We recruit. We don't draft. And so how do we find a way to eliminate that part of it? And so we need help in that space. Otherwise, it's just going to keep going crazy, and the whole model will be affected big time. Because if we have to shift all of our focus to supporting collectives, then it's just going to be a whole new financial model. So I worry about it a little bit. I know that there's collectives emerging in our marketplace. There's a couple of them that have contacted our compliance people and our SWAT team, trying to make sure they do it the right way, and their focus is is rightfully so on our current student athletes, not recruiting.
Did you feel like, as I know you put something out where you guys were, I think maybe had the most NIL money for your athletes, but as you saw that develop with football in particular, did you feel at all like you guys were behind or needed to catch up? And I guess how are you attacking that, if so?
Yeah, I felt like in that particular space with the collectives, where you see some of that recruiting stuff going on, it's no question we're behind, because we weren't doing that, and we're not encouraging that. And so yes, but the other part of it is, if you're a recruit and you're coming to Columbus, Ohio, and Ohio State, it's having those conversations with a Travion Henderson or others to say, hey, this is what I get here. And I don't want to disparage other markets, but the reality is, this market, if you're an entrepreneur and you're willing to get out there and do this thing the right way, you're going to hit home runs, if that's your interest. And we have to keep in mind that all recruits they're not wired in that. There's some. And so, but to your point is, we were behind and are behind in that space. And all it takes is us losing one class for us to take a step back. So how do we make sure we stay in the right way, relative to NCAA rules, stay the right way? Because still technically, you're not allowed to recruit with these inducements. So there's a lot of issues going around this issue right now. So, that's a great question. We are in that particular space behind.
With the alliance stuff, if it gets to the point where the Big Ten, the ACC, and the Pac-12 have some sort of deal where you're all playing each other every year. Might that impact your scheduled series with Texas and Alabama and Georgia teams that would be outside of that?
Which is why we're not going there. But yeah, that's the reason right there. We talked about it. I just don't see philosophically for us a scheduling model that's really worked for us, where we would be supportive of making that change. A 9 makes sense to us. I'm still willing to listen to 8, but even if we go 8, I'm not so sure we're going to mess around and schedule. We're going to carry the load for the conferences and schedule Pac-12 and ACC schools, because we're going to play, whoever it is. And it might be a Pac-12 or ACC school. It might be like Washington's on our schedule down the road. So, but I don't see us making any changes that way. Those games are huge. It's like Notre Dame. What is this, the 6th time we've played Notre Dame in the regular season? So it's the coolest thing. So, yeah, I don't see us making that change.
Sometime last year, they announced the Big Ten, Pac-12, ACC scheduling alliance to a lot of ballyhoo, made a lot of noise about it. There wasn't actually a contract, but, hey, it was a big fancy thing, and lots of conferences agreed on it, so it was going to be a big deal. Whatever happened to that? Are they really looking at possibly scheduling more games against the ACC and Pac-12 teams now as sort of a formal part of that agreement? You'll hear that answer from Gene Smith, and then you'll hear a follow-up question from Dan Hope of 11 Warriors.
When we first started the alliance, everything was a little bit about scheduling, and that kind of shifted a little bit. So we did have the 8 versus 9 conversation more intensely at that time, with the thought that, okay, if we played 8, is there some ACC/Pac-12 schools that many of us might play? But we moved away from that pretty quickly because many of us, felt 9 was still right for us in our scheduling model. And we felt that conference contests, when you look at it across the board, conference contests were, from a TV partner point of view, were just as valuable. And so we decided to kind of walk away from that a little bit. That doesn't mean it might not come back up. But at that point in time, we walked away. And then the alliance, the value of the alliance was just bringing together schools that think alike. With broad-based thought process relative to sports sponsorship and educationally based schools. So we kind of looked that way more than anything. But yeah, we talked about that early on and kind of stayed away from it since then. Not to say it might not come back.
Obviously, the college ball playoff, that's kind of been kicked the can down the road here with expansion. What are your thoughts on where things stand right now in terms of playoff expansion and what might happen next there?
I think we're going to expand. I think we'll go to. I'll be surprised if we don't go to 12 at some point. I think there's things that just need to be solved and worked out, and some of them have been. For example, when it first came out about us potentially hosting, and I know our fans rally around that and they like to host, Alabama up here, but that now we have the flexibility to move into domes. That was not a part of the deal. Now we can move into the Hoosier Dome or Ford Field or Minneapolis or whatever, as if we ended up hosting, and I think that's important because who knows what the inclement weather could be like at that time of year in any of our places in the north. So we need that flexibility. There's the conversations that the ACC has. There's a lot of issues that the ACC has, and that Jim Phillips has talked about publicly, and I'm not so sure any of those issues or all of them will be resolved in time for it to happen, in 24. But I think some of them can be, and so I think we're going to get there. I don't know when, but I do believe we're going to get there. My understanding is that. From a television point of view, other entities will have an opportunity to participate one way or the other through a bid process. So that's resolved one of my issues. So I think we're going to get there. I just think we just got to keep working through these little interests that each conference has, and some people will have to sacrifice and give up some of those interests. It's a negotiation. So I think we'll get there.
One of the very hot-button topics of the press conference was Smith's idea that maybe there was a case to move college football playoff games from campus sites in the north to a neutral site like, for example, Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis. That was something that I think people were very excited about, the idea of Alabama or Georgia or Texas A&M or LSU or USC coming to Columbus and having to play in the Horseshoe in December. So what's the case to move those games off campus sites to a neutral site like the Lucas Oil Stadium or somewhere like that?
Yeah, I obviously I'm still going to continue to look at the calendar and how that works, but right now, based upon what I understand, the calendar to be, I would probably recommend that we go to Indianapolis and play in the Hoosier Dome. I want a clean environment. I don't want a hard surface for the players. I know the fans loved it, to have it in the shoe and, maybe it's snowing and we're playing whoever. But that surface is a whole new ball game. And I would prefer to have the indoor elements and have a clean field for, if it was this year, I would want CJ to have good weather. It's just that simple. And so the excitement, in my view, would be the same. We've been blessed to have experiences in the Hoosier Dome, playing in the Big Ten Championship, and I think our fans understand that environment. They love the hotels, they love the restaurants, and all that. So while it's difficult to take it away from the shoe, I still think that's the right thing to do for the players in the game. We'll just have to pray that we're in that situation, or pray that we get a bye and that's not a part of it.
I know when I heard Gene Smith's first answer on games potentially being played in neutral sites, my question was, so is that true of everywhere? Is that true that the SEC teams would also not be playing on their home sites, or is that just true for potentially northern teams? Here's a little further clarification from Gene Smith on that.
Yeah, no, that we would only do that because of weather. Columbus, we're south of the snowboard, the snow belt. So our weather is different than it is in Wisconsin or Minnesota. So really, I want that flexibility for the league. But depending upon the date that this thing ends up, we may look at the historical calendar and say, oh, yeah, it's okay to play in Columbus. So we don't need to go do a deal that particular year with the Hoosier Dome. So that's why I say is the championship game still is valuable, because one of my concerns is, the length of time that the playoff is going to take. We're going into the third week of January. I mean, do we really need to do that to play the championship game? So I'm sensitive to finals week. We already impact that with the championship game for the conference. I'm sensitive. I'm old school. I'm sensitive to Christmas. I think our guys need 3 days off at least around that window of time. So I'm looking at that compaction, having those conversations with our colleagues, and I'm not alone. Everybody's having this conversation. But for us, it plays into the weather issue. The deeper you go in December, more, as you know, more challenging it is here. So I just want it for the North. I certainly wouldn't want to, go to Scottsdale and play in Glendale when you can play outdoors as they're at Arizona State.
But you're saying the North is moving it is just an option. It's not.
Yeah, just an option. Right. That's right. Just we want the flexibility to go indoors. It's not like automatic. Now you have to come up with a strategy to predetermine that at some point in time, because you have to cut the deal with the facility and do all the operations, ticket sales, all that. So there becomes a time, but a lot of that is really, the past point is going to be date dependent. And so I'm kind of anxious to see how this playoff schedule actually will end up. When will it actually start? So that's critical.
I'm guessing that you, like many people on the internet, had some thoughts on the idea of Big Ten schools maybe not playing home campus games for the college football playoff while other places did. Tony Gertman and I did a whole show of Buckeye Weekly. We dropped a new episode after the Gene Smith press conference on Wednesday, talking a whole bunch about that, sharing our thoughts on what made sense, what maybe didn't make sense, some of the whys behind what might be happening, and much more. So we'll talk about the college football playoff sites, that alliance of the Big Ten, Pac-12, and ACC, and why that may be falling apart, and much, much more. You can find that Buckeye Weekly show wherever you're listening to this morning Scoop show. Just search Buckeye Weekly or Buckeye Scoop to find that. You can download that right there. You can also subscribe, because we'll have another listener question show coming up on a little later on today. We'll drop that for you and that Buckeye Weekly feed as well. So lots of new content there. And you can find all of our great podcasts just like those You can find all of them just by searching Buckeye Scoop. So we've got the Big Me Kickoff Show with Kevin Noon, Around the Oval with Alex Gleitman, the Gives in the Bank podcast with Bart Givler and Bill the Bank Green. They're all wherever you find this. Just search Buckeye Scoop to find all of those. And you can find it also on YouTube at youtube.com/Buckeye Scoop. Whenever you watch one of our videos, we would really appreciate it if you hit that like button, hit that thumbs up. That will help other folks find these shows as well. And finally, if you were watching on YouTube, hit that bell, subscribe to our channel so you get notified every time when we post a new video, so then you never miss a thing. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.